Basically, they've limited eligibility to open work permit holders to basically those who are pursuing their PhDs or doctorates, their master's degree, and for those pursuing a bachelor's, but not just any bachelor's, they've enumerated specific professions or fields.
I'm currently studying. I'm in Canada. Am I going to be affected? What's going to happen to me? Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're watching this video, you might be interested in the spousal work permit changes here in Canada. Quick disclaimer. Any information provided on our YouTube channel is of a general nature and is for educational or informational purposes only. It's not intended as a substitute for professional advice or a guarantee of outcome. Should you decide to act upon any information on this channel, please proceed with caution. And viewers are advised to seek specific legal advice by contacting immigration lawyers that are active members of a law society in Canada or immigration consultants registered by ICCRC. If you want to make sure that you're up to date with the latest changes, please visit the Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada website. Now, in this video, we have our immigration consultant who will now talk about the changes, about this, the crazy changes that's been happening right now. We're going to focus now on spousal work permit changes. Everybody say hello again to Lou Donzella. Lou, welcome back.
Hey, good to see you.
Great to see you. Great to see you. And now, thank you for being here. We're getting a lot of questions about spousal work permit changes. So first part of this call, I'll pass it on to you. And then second part is I have some questions I got from the internet, which might be related to this. So first of all, let's talk about spousal work permit changes. Like, I know there were changes, but what was it before? And then what is it now, if you can expound on that?
Sure. The short and long of it is that they made some changes at the beginning of this year. So if we remember in the days of old times, basically, someone who's studying in Canada at the post-secondary level, if they're pursuing a one-year certificate, a two-year diploma, a full bachelor's, master's, et cetera, and they are going to a PGWP eligible institution, basically, like, the whole 9 yards. Most folks would be eligible to bring their spouse and their common law partners to Canada, and that they could apply for open work permits, essentially that allows their spouse or common law partner to work in Canada, which is great because, you don't want that person to lose income, and you want them to integrate into the Canadian society while you're studying. But as of early this year in March, they've made some announcement. So for applications received before March 19th of this year, they will be treated under the old rules. Essentially, if you're still pursuing a one-year program certificate or a two-year diploma, etc., as we talked about, they can bring their spouse and their common law partner under the old rules. And if their open work permit, for example, the spouse's open work permit is shorter than the study permit issued to the principal applicant, they can actually apply to extend that open work permit under the old rules still. They just have to include evidence that they qualified for it at the time that they applied, which would be before March 19th of 2024, this year. Now, for applications received between 19th of March to 29th of April, this is where it gets a little weird. Basically, they've limited eligibility to open work permit holders to basically those who are pursuing their PhDs or doctorates, their master's degree, and for those pursuing a bachelor's, but not just any bachelor's, they've enumerated specific professions or fields. And I'm just going to go through them very quickly. So that would be dental surgery, law, medicine, optometry, pharmacy, veterinary medicine, Bachelor of Science in Nursing, education as well, and Bachelor of Engineering. So those are the bachelor level programs that are eligible for them to be able to bring their spouse on an open work permit. And notice that I actually said Doctor of Medicine and Doctor of Optometry, even if it's a bachelor's. In Canada, they are in fact considered bachelor's degrees. These are first professional degrees in a field that requires you to be licensed, for example. And not just any licensed field qualifies. The enumerated list, you have to belong to that list in order for you to bring your spouse or common law partner. So that's for applications between March 19th and April 29th. And to complicate things a little bit more, applications after the 29th of April, meaning those received on or after up to today until they basically change the rules again. For those folks, they can bring their spouse or common law partner if they're studying at the PhD level, if they're studying at the master's level, or at the bachelor's level. And now I'm going to go through another list of enumerated fields where you would be eligible if you're bachelor's. So that would be dental surgery or dentistry. There's also law. There's medicine, there's optometry, pharmacy, veterinary medicine, Bachelor of Science in Nursing, Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Science in Nursing, Bachelor of Nursing Science, and then Bachelor of Nursing, then Bachelor of Education, Bachelor of Engineering. The big difference between the list between, let's say, March 19th to April 29th, and for April 30th and to date, is that they've broken down the nursing field. So originally it was just a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Now they actually enumerated that Bachelor of Science in Nursing, Bachelor of Science in Nursing Science, Bachelor of Nursing, they're all included on the list. So it's just a nomenclature thing, I think, but basically you need to belong moving forward after the 30th of April to all these enumerated fields. Otherwise, you can't bring your spouse and common law partner. One final note to basically emphasize is that notice that I didn't mention anything about 2-year diplomas or 1-year certificates, where a lot of people have taken advantage of the open work permit for their spouses. These are usually programs that are offered by public colleges, and they tend to be cheaper than a master's degree or a doctorate or, say, a bachelor's in Canada, because, first of all, those are shorter programs, the diplomas and the certificates. That is not by mistake. That is actually by design. They have now excluded folks pursuing anything lower than a bachelor's from benefiting from the C-42 open work permit. So that's the long and short of it, Davi. I hope that little tour gives us an idea of who's qualified and who's not.
That is huge. If I'm looking at this from their lens, what happens if currently I am in the spousal work permit category and I'm currently in a 2-year program? Am I going to be affected? I'm currently studying. I'm in Canada. Am I going to be affected? What's going to happen to me?
You're talking about the open work permit holder, right? So
yeah,
in that situation, I would imagine that if they had applied together from outside Canada, that their permits would be coterminous, meaning they would expire at the same time. So the study permit holder would typically be given the duration of their studies plus 90 days. The accompanying spouse on an open work permit would generally receive their principal applicant's duration of studies, including the 90 days. So say, for example, if you start in September of 2024 and it's a 2-year program, let's just say hypothetically that ends in April of 2026, for example, that permit typically expires sometime in July of 2026 for the study permit holder. And usually the work permit holder will have or enjoy the same duration of an open work permit. Unless, for example, the open work permit holder has a shorter passport, for example, in terms of validity, because Canada will only issue up to the maximum of someone's passport, then in that situation, this open work permit holder would need to renew or apply to extend their work permit once they have a new passport. In this situation, they would really just need to submit proof that they qualified for an open work permit for spouses of international students at the time of application that they submitted. And keep in mind that this example is hypothetical, because if it's a 2-year program, and if you applied after, March 19th, I believe it was, then you would not necessarily be eligible for an open work permit anymore as a spouse to an international student. You need to be your spouse, rather, a common law partner, the student needs to be in a PhD, master's, or bachelor's in a specific, profession.
So, Lou, to clarify on that, couples who are already in Canada will also be affected by this? Like, let's
They
say,
could be.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah, they could be. It depends on like their situation. So generally speaking, they won't be because in theory they would have received the same duration of a work permit, so it's valid. They're not going to cancel it, so don't worry about it. But if their permits are going to expire before, let's say, their spouse's study permit expires, then they'll need to extend, obviously. Uh, the question would be, would they qualify for a work permit extension because of these new rules? Well, the answer is yes, so long as, in theory, so long as they have submitted an open work permit application along with the study permit application at the time when it was still it was still the old rules, meaning they were still eligible for the C-42 open work permit. So
that
they need to show proof of that.
got it. Okay, it's getting really complicated. So two things.
Yeah,
If you're watching this, check the link in the description below. I'll add the official link for more information about this. And secondly, I personally, if I was in the same situation, I would not tackle this alone. It seems very complicated. If you already invested a lot of money to go to Canada, I highly suggest you set up a consultation with Lou and his team. Get professional legal advice and legit advice. Don't tackle this by yourself. Go to Facebook groups, watch, other vloggers on TikTok. You want to make sure that you're guided correctly. So yeah, I've partnered up with Lou. He has a special consultation link below. Lou, can you tell us more about that and what they can expect in those sessions?
yeah, absolutely. So it's a full blown consultation. We normally charge $300 for said consultation. If you use Davi's and Bea's link, you will receive a $100 discount on your consultation.
Awesome. Yeah, so check that out in the video description below. Okay. So Lou, while we have a bit of time, I gathered some questions from the internet. I'll just ask them one by one, then just let us know the answer. How's that sound?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Perfect. So regarding spousal work permit changes, first question. If my spouse's study permit gets extended, how can I apply for an extension of my open work permit?
So I'm trying to imagine a situation where the principal applicant would need to extend their study permit. Say for example, there was a delay in the studies. Then again, that thing that I told you about earlier. If at the time of the original application you qualified for it, you need to submit proof that you qualified for it when you're applying to extend your open work permit. According to the rules that they've published on the website, you should still be eligible for a C-42 open work permit.
Got it. Second question. We're talking about dependent children. Can
Mm.
our dependent children apply for an open work permit or are they limited to study permits?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one that keeps coming back, and I think the confusion comes from the fact that certain work permit holders, for example, those are supported by a labor market impact assessment or they're exempt from it. Sometimes they can get their children to apply for work permits. In this situation, if your family is coming in with a principal as an international student to Canada, your dependent children can actually not apply for an open work permit, full stop. They can, however, apply for an open study permit if they're still the age of basically if they're attending kindergarten up to high school. K to 12, basically, or they can apply for a visitor record or a TRV to enter Canada as a visitor. It really depends on the situation. Say, for example, if they're younger than 6 years old, they're not going to school yet, they may not necessarily need a study permit. But if they're older than 6, they typically need to apply for a study permit anyway because they will be attending primary or secondary.
Thank you. And regarding full-time study requirement, what if my spouse switches from full-time to part-time study while on a study permit? How will this affect my eligibility for an open work permit?
Right. I think we need to unpack that question because, first of all, the principal applicant here, which is the study permit holder, typically they will carry conditions on their study permits. And one of the things that a lot of people take for granted is they cannot just drop into part time status unless it's authorized by the university or their college. Second of all, it can affect your PGWP eligibility, which we will talk about soon, of course. But what's interesting about this is what happens to the open work permit holder. In a nutshell, nothing. Basically, the conditions attached to a study permit is that you need to study full time unless you're authorized to drop to part time. And there are very narrow circumstances that you can. But the open work permit holder, they need to stick to the conditions set on their own individual open work permit. Doesn't mean that if your principal study permit holder falls through the crack, that you fall through the crack as well. As long as your permit as an open work permit holder is still valid, it's still valid until such a time that immigration or CBSA cancels it.
Got it. And regarding institution eligibility, are there any restrictions on which educational institutions my spouse needs to be enrolled in for me to be eligible for an open work permit?
That's a really good one. So under the old rules, you need to be attending, the student, that is, they need to be attending uh, a designated learning institution, as we all know. With the new rules, it's really interesting in terms of eligibility for an open work permit for spouses. We know that they're now going to be limited to those whose student is pursuing a PhD, a master's, and a bachelor's. And we know for a fact that these are going to be universities or polytechnic institutes. They're probably not going to get these types of degrees from, let's say, public colleges, or even worse, private colleges or the career colleges. So yeah, there is an indirect way of limiting eligibility to an open work permit for spouses by limiting the type of programs that you'd be qualified for, specifically the international student, as regards to the open work permit eligibility.
Thank you. And about application timeline, is it better to apply for the open work permit before coming to Canada, or can I apply after I arrive on a temporary resident visa?
Let me preface this by saying that it's always better to apply for an open work permit from outside Canada if you're already eligible for it. Mostly because you don't want to get pinched at the border, for example, because the border officer will have nothing else to do but just to verify your identity and print your eligible work permit. That being said, there was a time when holders of a visitor visa, they can come to Canada and apply for a work permit from inside Canada. That was a temporary public policy put in place during the time of the pandemic. That is no longer a valid policy, and people can no longer do this. They need to qualify under certain circumstances to be able to apply for work permits from inside Canada as a visitor. Unfortunately, being spouse to an international student does not count. And then the next natural question I typically get to this, Devi, is, what if I flagpole? Well, you know how I feel about flagpoling. It's an option of last resort because things could go really bad for you if you do that, incorrectly anyway. But that being said, they've already stopped, they've disallowed flagpoling for PGWP applications. Not for C-42 open work permits for spouses of international students, but I can see why an officer would decline to do this. So it wouldn't surprise me if you'd have trouble. So I would avoid that as much as possible.
Gotcha. And regarding on the impact of study program changes. So what happens if my spouse changes their program of study or transfer to another designated learning institution? Will this impact my open work permit?
If your work permit is still valid for quite some time, it shouldn't, in theory. So say, for example, if you still have a year and a half left on your work permit, you should be fine. But keep in mind that, say, for example, your spouse, decides to change programs, and they change to a new program in the middle of their studies, as you just described. They would be covered by the new rules, meaning the rules that apply after March 19th of 2024, meaning that this person needs to be pursuing a PhD, master's, or a bachelor's in specific fields in order to have this student's spouse or common law partner qualify for an open work permit. So just be very careful about this.
Thank you. Lou, final question here. What specific documents are needed to prove that we are in a genuine relationship for the purposes of the spousal open work permit application?
So let's break this down very quickly. For spouses, you need your marriage certificate or certificate of marriage, your marriage contract, essentially that, and proof that you're living together, proof that you have, kids, for example. So that's not a bad thing to include in your application. For common law partners, it becomes a little complicated because not only do you need the statutory declaration of common law union that needs to be under seal of a notary or a commissioner for taking affidavits, but you also need to show some evidence that you've lived together for at least 12 months because that is the definition of a common law partner, that you have a marriage-like relationship and that you have lived for a minimum of 12 months continuously. Now, proof of that would be like proof of addresses, mail, for example, the billing in your phone, for example, your driver's licenses, which would have your addresses shown, and the like.
Awesome, Lou. Thank you so much. Guys, we'll wrap it there. Stay tuned for more content. Again, I highly recommend you booking a consultation with Lou and his team. Check the description below. Get $100 off. Lou, we'll see you again. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Davy.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.